from the Fox 5 studios, this is Silver State Sports Live.
Day 8 and back in pads for the Raiders. Lots to talk about the silver and black. Happy Friday and welcome inside Silver State Sports Live. I'm Mike Davis. Another week in the books as the Raiders wrapped up Day 8 of training camp at the Intermountain Healthcare Performance Center. Cloudy skies and some murky energy as friend of the show and Raiders writer Sam Warren reported some feisty energy at the end of camp, detailing a moment on his X handle when Max Crosby tipped a pass in the backfield and Kirk Cousins got in his face, grabbing his collar. Then some shouting ensued. Some alpha energy we love to see. Make sure you're following Sam from The Athletic at SamWarren83 for more gems like this. So now we bring in another great guy, Jonathan Von Tobel, the host of Money Moves on VSiN Live. Good to see you, JVT. So let's start with the reported kerfuffle between Max Crosby and Kirk Cousins at camp today. Personally, I love to see it. Two vets, two leaders bringing that passion, that alpha dog energy. Is this something good to see?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look, it's funny, too, because it's Kirk Cousins in the midst of it, right? I don't think a lot of people would expect that would be the case. Our guy that, of course, I think leads the league in Coles cash overall, but doesn't really have that fiery mentality that many believe that he does. But I think you do like this sort of thing because there is an intensity that you want for a team that has not had overall success since they've been out here. And that shows a passion on both sides that they want to get this thing done and get this thing going. So I'm with you. I like this sort of thing when it comes to camp. No matter what the team is, you want to see some of that fire.
Okay, happy we're on the same page. Let's stay with Crosby for a second because it looks like Mad Max is back and looking like his old self as he's returning to form from a torn meniscus. Now, of course, fans remember the botched Ravens trade for 2 firsts, which went down in the offseason, and rumors are starting to swirl again, this time stemming from ESPN's Adam Schefter. So do you think Max Crosby is ultimately traded this season?
I think it makes sense what Schefter's putting out there, that ultimately at the trade deadline, if this team is not winning as many games as many believe that they want to, and again, their win total is like a 5.5, so we expect maybe a rough season for this group. So if they're floundering around the trade deadline and Max is looking healthy, look, this is just the basics of the National Football League and really any sport. When you have an asset like Max Crosby and you're a team that's timeline doesn't match up with him, there's certainly a strong possibility that at the deadline, a contender that needs a pass rusher, it's a position of value, could come calling and they could offer something for him. So I would say at the deadline, absolutely there's a chance that Max Crosby could find his way onto another team yet again. And frankly, I think the Raiders might be hoping that's the case because building assets around a young team and Fernando Mendoza specifically as the future moves forward, I think that's maybe what you want here. So I would say it's certainly a possibility, and I think Schefter's onto something.
Okay, so Kirk Cousins teaming up again with Clint Kubiak, a guy he worked with prior in Minnesota. So we know Captain Kirk knows this offense. But if you were running things, Jonathan, when would you like to see top pick Fernando Mendoza get his chance? Should he sit the entire season, or which week would you like to see him come in?
You know, it's always funny because this is not a perfect thing. Like I always like to make the joke with these rookie quarterbacks. A coach doesn't walk in one day and say, you know, there's a special gleam in your eye, kid. I think you're ready. This is always about who wants to play when they're ready, and everybody is different. Look at Patrick Mahomes, who didn't play the entirety of his first year in the league, save for the final week, and then hit the ground running in his second year. And then some guys start from week one, Andrew Luck and others, of course, in the past. So I think it's up to the person, the individual. But I'm one that is, the mindset, iron sharpens iron. You're not going to be ready unless you do it. And I'm a big learn by doing guy. It also has to do with your goals as a team. I think the Raiders do expect and want to try to make a push for the playoffs, and making sure that Fernando Mendoza is coming along and learning. I don't think those two things specifically match. So if they want to win games, Kirk Cousins is their guy because he gives them the best opportunity. But if they want to develop for the future, tying back into Max Crosby, trading Max and developing Fernando Mendoza and just giving him the crack right away, I think that's what you do.
Yeah, we also got to see how this O-line is shaping up. We don't want Mendoza getting beat up too bad, so we got to see how that translates from last year to this year. A lot of changes, but of course it starts with the head coaching position because such a coaching carousel situation from the head coaching spot here in Vegas, from Gruden to Bisaccia to Josh McDaniels, Antonio Pierce, and then last year, Pete Carroll. So why do you think, Jonathan, Clint Kubiak is going to be the answer for Raider Nation and finally bring some stability to that HC spot?
Well, because it's a progressive hire for the most part from a football perspective, right? I mean, it's a younger offensive mind, and this is 2026 football. And when you look at teams that are having success for the most part, you're looking at teams that are looking forward with their offense and allowing some of these young assistants to come up and do a good job with these groups. So, and I think that is the way you're supposed to do it in 2026. And I think that's obviously what the Raiders are doing. Kubiak comes from an offensive tree that allows quarterbacks to have a relatively solid floor. Look at all of the quarterbacks in the NFL's history that have played in this offense that have been pretty productive when they have played in it. I think it's a really smart move to bring a younger offensive mind forward to allow him to run the team. And look what they've done with John Spytek as well, using him in the front office. I think the Raiders are showing that they're finally thinking a little bit more progressively from a football standpoint and allowing youth to an extent to really bring this franchise forward, whether it's quarterback, whether it's head coach, or whether it's general manager. And that's why I think this is going to work.
Okay, last thing for you, Jonathan. Next week, we, of course, get our first preseason game in the fold against the Cardinals. We got to see them in action a little bit last night. Carson Beck didn't look too bad. What do you want to see from the Silver and Black next week?
I mean, it's obvious. It's Fernando Mendoza, right? We want to see him out there. Despite everything that we've talked about here and what they're going to do with him, you just want to see what he looks like in a pro-style offense, in a Raiders uniform. I think that is number one what everybody wants to see, because there's reports that he was struggling a little bit at camp, especially at the early portion. He's had some ups and downs. I think that's just part of being a rookie. But you want to see what he looks like in live fire. And I'm going to be very curious to see what they set up around him. Will they put the starting offensive line in front of him to give him the best opportunity? What do these wide receivers look like? Because many in the league question the depth at that position group for the Raiders as well. I think there's lots of things you want to see, but for sure, top of the list is the first overall pick.
Of course, we got to see him in those sweet threads. Stick tight with us, because you're going to be hanging out with us in the next block. But everybody at home, don't forget you can watch the Raiders all preseason long on our sister station, Fox 5 Las Vegas. Tune in to Raiders pregame live 30 minutes before each game to get ready for kickoff. All right, still to come on Silver State Sports Live. JVT is going to stay on the line with us, because after the break, he's going to tell us what he saw today at UNLV Fall Camp.
This week on the Silver State Sports and Entertainment Network. Your Triple SEN lineup is sponsored by AAA Roadside Assistance. Visit AAA today.
You're watching Silver State Sports Live.
Okay, so the ramp up for week 0 continues over at Camp Rebel, a game with college football playoff implications in week 0. Well, that's what's on the docket for the UNLV football program on August 29th when the Memphis Tigers come to town. Coach Mullen and the Rebels have a playoff berth in the back of their minds as work continues over at the Fertitta Football Complex. Now, if UNLV wants to go where they think they can in 2026, they're going to need to lean on their senior running backs, Jet Thomas and Jalen Glover. The two-headed monster out of the backfield spoke today about how they each complement each other.
Really, Glove my bro. We always have a little bickery during inside run. We just want to make each other better. He tells me something that I'm doing wrong, and I also tell him something. We just piggyback off each other.
We got a little saying, we go Sonic and Knuckles. I think watching Jet play just only gives me motivation to be great. Similar games, but I think we all have our own significant things that's really special to us. But I love playing with Jet. I mean, it's just fun coming to practice every day because he's a great back. I would say I'm a good back as well, and we just, like I said, we just compete.
All right, you gotta love that. Sonic and Knuckles, kind of like what they had in Detroit with the running back situation there a year or two ago. But we're back right now with JVT, Jonathan Von Tobel with Wiesen. Jonathan, let's talk about Jet Thomas and Jalen Glover. How good is this UNLV running back combo?
I think it's fantastic, and it's obviously very important, but Thomas himself averaging over 7 yards per carry last year. He's going to be vital to what they're going to do this season, especially when you talk about a quarterback battle that seems to be going deep into camp potentially. But they need to find balance. They need to be explosive through the air and on the ground. And having an explosive player like Thomas at the front and the ability to back that up with Glover, I think is going to be absolutely vital to what this team wants to do, like you mentioned, with the playoff berth potentially on the line for them this year, these two guys are going to be at the top of mind outside of quarterback. If this is going to work, it is going to work through those two guys on the ground.
Yeah, while tight end might be a quarterback's security blanket, a running game is a quarterback's best friend, along with an O-line, of course. But let's talk about the starting quarterback situation for 2026. So Jackson Arnold or Alex Orji. I mean, Jackson Arnold's a guy who has that 5-star pedigree coming out of high school, had a lot of great momentum coming out of high school, but he really looks like he can throw the ball. I like the release. Alex Orji, of course, a little bit more of a mobile quarterback. Is there a true competition here, or is this really Jackson Arnold's job?
I personally think it's Jackson Arnold's job. At the times that I've gone out there and watched, especially with the team drills, the offense seems to have some more consistency when Arnold's out there pulling the trigger at quarterback, whether it's with the 1s or the 2s. And that goes back to even watching them in spring as well. I think Orji, as you mentioned, is a dynamic athlete, and there's going to be packages, I would assume, with both of them out of the field at one time, or Orji's going to have his time out there on the field as well. But I think if you're talking down to down who the starting quarterback is going to be, I think it's going to be Jackson Arnold who gives them the best opportunity to run this offense as smoothly as they want it to be run. So I would be pretty surprised if it's not Jackson Arnold under center for them when they take on Memphis in week 0.
Okay, Dan Mullen, a great quarterback guru. He's coached a lot of great guys like Dak Prescott, so we can see what he'll do with Jackson Arnold this coming season. But let's transition to the defense, because that was the big issue last season, JVT. So how much of an improvement, if any, can you expect from Paul Gunther's squad, and how much of an impact does the return of Mike Shear have on that potential turnaround?
I mean, I think it's going to be huge. One of the big things that they kept talking about from last year was, remember, Gunther gets the late start as defensive coordinator due to a late resignation. It's right at the start around spring. So they talked a lot about not being able to install a lot of what they wanted. And I even asked Dan Mullen about that on Sunday night's practice about, hey, where do you feel like you're at this point in comparison to last year? And he told us, hey, way, way ahead from where they were a season ago. So I think all of this, including Shear back too, this is all going to be something that, if they're right in what they've talked about, the fact that the full install wasn't able to be put out there because of the late change at defensive coordinator last season, then this is going to be something where you would expect improvement. And then you just talk about everything, the additions that they brought in this defensive backfield, the internal promotion and the like that they have shown in terms of their defensive line and getting some bodies back due to some lawsuits as well. I think this is going to be pretty big for UNLV. So I would expect, if we're listening to what they're saying, that this team should be much better, especially when it comes to giving up those explosives. There's a really big issue for them last year.
Yeah, really good synergy. Gunther and Mullen, both roommates, I believe, at Ursinus College together, so they go way, way back. Let's talk about LaTerrence Welch, though, and Donovan Spellman around the program. We're seeing them, in some cases, in full uniform. What is their path to returning to the Rebels in 2026, and how much of a boost would they be to this defense that needs a real turnaround?
I mean, to answer the second question, it would be huge. When you're able to add guys who have starting potential back to the roster that are a little bit older, obviously, I think it's massive for a team that has the aspirations of making it to the college football playoff and winning a conference championship. So I think it's massive that they're going to be back out there. Look, as far as what it's going to look like, it's interesting. I mean, you never really trust when lawsuits are involved if anything is absolutely set with some of these guys, especially when you're talking about collecting a paycheck at the Nighthawks. So that's going to be something I think worth monitoring here. But it does seem like there is a pretty clear path. The NCAA has not had a very good track record when it comes to these lawsuits and the success involving them. And I would assume, just as UNLV, I think, does to an extent, right? These guys are now on the roster when you go up on the website, that they're going to be there for this team. We'll see what happens as we move forward, but I expect right now you're getting two really important bodies back.
All right, great stuff. Last thing for you, JVT. So in your opinion, is UNLV a college football playoff team in 2026?
I think they have the potential to do it. I think that schedule is a lot trickier than I think we're discussing. You know, you start with Memphis, which, by the way, is a college football playoff caliber team in their own right. So that's almost an eliminator to start the season. And then this tricky stretch on the road where they start this, where you've got to take on Akron and all these programs, Hawaii. That's a really tough schedule. And it stretches all the way to that matchup with the Air Force as well, near the start of like the full conference schedule. So I think they have the caliber team to do it, but will they be able to navigate one of the more difficult schedules and be a 1 or 2 loss conference champion? I think that's something else, because that's a lot of coin flips you're asking to go heads for you. And as we know, that's 50-50. That's not something you can string together normally.
100%. All right, Jonathan Von Tobel, make sure you go check him out. VSiN Live, Monday through Friday, Money Moves, 11 to 1. Thanks so much, JVT. We appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me.
All right, an instant classic for the Aces last night. We got highlights from a rowdy game against the Fever.
You're watching Silver State Sports Live.
All right, so there's an argument to be made that the Aces played in and won the game of the year in the WNBA in 2026. Let's go to Gainbridge Fieldhouse in Indianapolis. We begin in the second quarter, where after a back-and-forth first quarter, the Fever open up a 17-point lead in the Fieldhouse. Caitlin Clark finds Michaela Timpson for the lay-in, and Indiana would eventually make it a 20-point lead late in the first half. But Jackie Young punching back, leading the Aces on the comeback trail, which included this and one beauty. The Aces would cut the lead to 5 at halftime. But this game was back and forth the entire second half, but we fast forward to the final seconds of the fourth quarter. Aces down 3. The Las Vegas inbound is nearly intercepted by Indiana, but the point guard, Chelsea Gray, picks up that loose change, buries it, quiet the Fever crowd. Take a look at this, sending the game to overtime. Boom. Super pretty stuff right there. But then in overtime, the Aces down 1 with 12 seconds to go. Asia Wilson harasses Caitlin Clark, gets the steal. Gray finds Young, who goes back to Gray, and she buries the game winner. A buzzer-beating three-point ball. Deja vu for the overtime winner on the road. Chelsea silencing the Fever faithful once and for all. An absolutely incredible game, an instant classic. Gray walked us through both of those game-saving threes.
We had a play. It wasn't for me. It wasn't drawn up that way. Aaliyah Boston deflected it. It was a pass to me, and it was going to be a different shot. But Jackie, she kept playing, hit it back to me, and I looked up at the clock. I only had 1 second, one dribble pull, knocked it down. And then overtime, first of all, Asia had a great stop defensively. Like we always say, it's going to come down to our defense. And she had a great stop defensively, got it to me on the outlet. I knew Becky wasn't we had an advantage. She wasn't going to call a timeout. So I hit it to Jackie, make her go score the basketball, but she hunted me on three-point line, looked up at the clock again, knocked it down. Woo!
Meanwhile, 2 fans were removed from their seats in the third quarter of last night's game after comments that Jackie Young sent went a bit too far. The 2 men were escorted out of their seats, but after further investigation, security determined there was no violation of fan code conduct, and those fans were allowed to go back in, but elected to leave instead. Jackie Young declined to share specifics on the situation. While the season is heating up for the Aces, the A's are limping to the finish line in their 2026 campaign. Now, breaking this afternoon, the A's announced that the club and general manager David Forst have mutually agreed to part ways. Forst had spent the past 27 seasons with the athletics organization. Assistant GM Dan Feinstein will serve as interim GM for the rest of the year. And the A's will begin a search for a new full-time GM in the offseason. Now, his ouster comes as the A's have fallen to 25 games under 500. They have not won a series since they played in Vegas in mid-June. And get this, they played 19 games since the All-Star break in mid-July, and they've won just 4 of those and have lost 8 in a row. For context, injuries have plagued this team all season long, so the record doesn't necessarily reflect the talent they have, as they're without Nick Kurtz, Shea Langoliers, Brent Rooker, and a laundry list of other key contributors. Now they head to Boston for a 3-game series against the Red Sox, who are trending in the exact opposite direction of the A's. The Sox are one of the single hottest teams in baseball and are on a heater for the ages, as they are winners of 31 of their last 36 games. Incredible stuff there. We'll be right back after a short break. Couple last things for you here, Fab. So let's talk about this. Pertinent to Las Vegas and everybody here, Ashton Genty. There was so much fanfare associated with him being a top draft pick last season. And of course, the offensive line situation was dreadful here in Las Vegas. Of course, Pete Carroll's son was heading up that unit, and people didn't even know who to block. So it's hard to decipher how much was Ashton Genty's fault, how much was it situational. This year, how are you looking at him? Where should he be getting drafted? Because a Clint Kubiak comes in. He's a guy who comes from that Shanahan tree. He knows the run zone blocking schemes. He got Kenny Walker off. He got Charbonnet off in Seattle. So where does Ashton Genty go in a lot of the drafts that you're a part of? Where would you select him? Can he have a major bounce back season in year 2?
Yeah, it's funny. You talk about him having a disappointing rookie season. I think he finished 11th among running backs in points, but he was wicked inconsistent. I'm from Connecticut, so wicked is part of my vernacular here. He wasn't awful when the season was done, and you look at the stats, it was just a bunch of his points only came in a handful of games, and he had a bunch of stinkers. And Pete Carroll, it didn't work out. You want me to talk about Chip Kelly? No, you don't want to forget that. Clint Kubiak is a guy who's an offensive mind. And, you look back at Clint Kubiak's time as an offensive coordinator. I mean, the running backs have typically done pretty well. Last year, it was hard to trust either Walker or Charbonnet because they were splitting the workload. But, combined, they had a good backfield. And when Charbonnet went out and the Seahawks make that run to the Super Bowl, Walker was very good. He won the MVP, obviously, and then made a whole bunch of money in Kansas City. So there's nothing bad that came from this Raiders offseason as it pertains to Genty. It's all good. The offensive line should be better. I mean, how can it be worse? It should be much better. Quarterback situation, you may open up with Kirk Cousins, and then Fernando Mendoza gets folded into the mix. Who knows? After a month, after 2 months, who knows? We're going to find out. But I think the situation is better, and he doesn't have competition in that backfield. I mean, I'm not going to say, Mike Washington is going to be this guy who's going to play the Zach Charbonnet role. No. Genty's going to be the dude.
Genty's a first-round pick in fantasy drafts.
Late first-round pick, yeah. I've seen him come off the board early second in the worst-case scenario. I've got him like right around 11 or 12 overall. And so, yeah, last year was not great. But again, the numbers at the end of the year were there. He just wasn't consistent.